Hello, everybody. Good evening. Good evening, Trust. We are doing fine today. My name is Abimo Olayiwola. I'm the founder of Digital Lawyers Network, and I'm the principal of Abbey Legal. Um, this evening, I have with me Mrs. Mary, who is a seasoned corporate commercial lawyer, and she's going to be taking us through the fundamentals of corporate commercial law. I understand that Mrs. Mary is sound and she is ready to deliver. She is ready to tell us the basics and the fundamentals of corporate commercial law practice. And so I wouldn't want to waste your time. Mrs. Mary, you have the floor. Good evening and welcome to the Digital Lawyers Network.
Good evening, Abimo. Thank you for having me. Apologies, everyone.
Hello, Mrs. Mary.
Yes, can you hear me? Hi, Abimo. Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me? Hi, Abimo. I'm not sure if you can hear me though. I can't hear you, but on the assumption that you can and that everybody can hear me, I'm just going to speak. So thank you all for your persistence. We're supposed to have this live yesterday, but for some reason, lots of technical hitches, we could not go live. And even this evening, we've had the same technical hitches until it was resolved. Um, so I was meant to speak to you about the fundamentals of corporate commercial law practice. What I would say is there are I would say probably four things you need to know if you are going to be an expert really as a corporate commercial lawyer. The first one is knowledge of the law. I know it's very basic, but it bears repeating. And it bears repeating because, we all did legal methods, sources of Nigerian law, but sometimes we do forget. In practice, there's the whole tendency to focus on just the current statutes that are in the LFN or in the states, or in the compilation of laws of the state where we're practicing. And that actually does, ourselves and our clients a disservice. It's very important to keep in mind at all times that our law comprises statutes of general application that we received from England up until 1st of January 1900. Our law also comprises common law and a principle of equity as was practiced up until 1900. Um, our law, of course, comprises, that's a bit nebulous. I would say changes with time. Customary law that isn't contrary to the principles of equity and common sense. That isn't repugnant. And our law also comprises, what's the word? You know, public policy, quote unquote, that sort of changes as we go along. And why is this important that you bear this in mind? Because when you're creating security, for instance, right, or you're giving a guarantee, the laws that apply to these transactions are really old laws. The statute of frauds, which is I think 1770 something, so it's very important to just remember that those laws, like equation security, I think there's a law of 18 something that applies, that those laws have an impact on what happens in Nigeria, not just the current laws as we have it today. So it's very important to sort of brush up um, what we had learned in uni. The second one I would say is mastery of English language. And, due to various circumstances, some of us, read and speak better than others. But the lawyer and the corporate commercial lawyer, the tool of trade really is English. Whether you're drafting a contract or you're reviewing a contract or you are giving an opinion, or issuing a formal legal opinion, and there's a difference between giving an opinion and issuing a formal legal opinion. Whether you're doing all of this, your tool of trade is English. And sometimes, an is where there should have been a worse, or a comma where there should have been some semicolon, or full stop where we should have had inverted commas, gives a completely different coloration to what you wanted to convey. So for this reason, it is crucial, super important, that you take the time to improve your mastery of the spoken and written English, and particularly written English, because that's what, if for God forbid we're going to court, that's what the judges are going to interpret what you have written down in the agreement. Um, and then that moves me then to research skills. Research skills, because many times, sometimes, not all the time, sometimes what the client wants to do is a novel area of law where there isn't exactly, what's the word I would use, where there isn't exactly a clear quote sort of answer. So this is the answer. So you need to be able to conduct research effectively to determine which laws provide the best guidance. In this respect, I will talk about a transaction I did. Actually, I did that transaction from 13 years ago. So the first exchange traded fund was listed on the stock of the exchange in 2011. It is public notice, so I can talk about the transaction now. Yeah, it was the APSA exchange traded fund. Um, and the APSA exchange traded fund is a gold backed ETF. And what they were trying to do at the time was to come into Nigeria and list their ETF. Um, but we didn't have very well developed laws at the time when they started. Transaction started about 2 years before it eventually saw the light of the day. So part of what we're trying to do was, first thing we did was even understand what an ETF. What is the closest to what an ETF is in Nigeria? Looked at the law, the draft law that the SEC had at the time, and saw whether it was a fit or not. So that required some sort of research into what other jurisdictions had done, what Nigeria is looking to do, how do we persuade the SEC um, to see if what we had in mind, and this was like I said, the very first exchange traded fund was going to work. Now, bear in mind that what APSA wanted to do was some sort of investment, but they weren't really bringing in money. They were bringing in equity, which is also like an intangible right. And they were hoping to take money out of Nigeria. And remember our rules around how foreign investment, for you to take money, you need a CCI. So the question was, even though there wasn't any particular straightforward law at the time, we worked with the SEC to extrapolate and say, hey, look, this should work for this reason. But we figured out, look, you're not bringing in cash, you're bringing in equity, which is great, but we need a CCI to take your money out. So it meant we needed to speak to the CBN about approvals. But that research helps us see what the bottlenecks might possibly be, and helped us refine the sort of arguments we're going to be making. Um, and we worked also with the NSC in developing rules that will allow us to list that, right? So your research skills have to be top notch. You must also sort of understand how to extrapolate what you've learned from one, some principles you've learned from one um, transaction to the next. Then moving on from research, another skill you have to understand and master, and which is very much linked to mastery of English language, is contract review and contract drafting. Now, these why is this important? Every single transaction you can think about. Oh, we're having a merger. I'm acquiring shares. I'm investing in this company. Buying a piece of land. I'm hiring an airplane, wet lease that I can use in Nigeria. I'm investing in marginal field 0.00001, whatever. Every single thing that I have mentioned here is um, contract, is some sort of contract going on. And so, for that reason, you do need to keep in mind, even when you're drafting, first of all, the basic principles of contract, right? The parties. You have to define the parties very clearly. Has there been an offer? Well, in the sense of an offer would be that you've prepared your agreement based on the terms of the client had instructed you to be. This is what it is. The acceptance, I would say, would happen when the other party agrees with that term and signs it. You have to look out for legal capacity. So when it's a business name that is buying, you do know the business name does not have a separate legal entity. So you have to describe that party properly. Um, and then consideration, very important. So there's no consideration for the transaction. Then your best bet, so that it is not challenged, is to ensure that it's assigned on as a deed, because that suffices, right? But this is just sort of the basics around contract drafting. How do you determine what clauses to put in? And I will start with something as simple as a share subscription agreement. The share subscription agreement, to be sure that you've done the right thing, um, keeping in mind those principles of contract, which all of us know, which I had outlined, which I'm sure you know about. You have to then think about what is the subject matter of this transaction. And the subject matter of the transaction is the acquisition of shares. And acquisition of shares from who? From the company. So you have to think about what are you buying from the company? Um, what is the cost? How much does it cost? Does it cost to buy per share? Are there conditions that need to be fulfilled before the transaction is fulfilled? And if you're and here I'm assuming you're asking for the subscriber who's the investor who's bringing in money. If the investor is not a Nigerian, are there approvals you need to make that deal happen? Those are the questions you must have in mind when you're drafting. And this applies, and you can apply the same principle to whatever contract you're drafting or whatever contract you're reviewing. I should say a quick word about boiler clauses. You will typically find them under the section called miscellaneous or general provisions of a contract, and it's really very long, very lawyer spec. You're looking at something called counterparts. Sometimes you see amendments and variation. You see entire agreements. Now, what are boiler clauses? Um, they're almost like steady, ready template provisions that clarify things. Um, Around what will happen when there's a dispute, like governing law provisions and jurisdiction. It also clarifies what would happen if, for instance, sometimes you find force majeure clauses there too. What happens with the force majeure event? How is that going to be dealt with? What happens if we need to amend the contract? What are the requirements for amending the contract? What happens if the parties are in different locations? How do we ensure that the contract is binding, which is where you have a counterpart? And that's it on contract drafting and reviewing. The last thing I would talk about actually is due diligence reviews. Now, due diligence simply means investigation to find out the state of affairs of um, the company you're conducting the review at, and you would need it depending on the transaction you're doing. You're trying to just understand whether what it says you want to buy is what it says that you're buying. Um, and that investigation, well, is legal due diligence because there are other forms of due diligence. We have the financial, we have environmental, we have tax. Yeah. So your focus really is to see that the company is compliant from a Nigerian law perspective in terms of how it carries its business, conducts its business, and what exposure, what sort of risk you should guard against when you're structuring your transaction. So these are sort of the, I would say, the most commonest and the most fundamental skills you need as you start off your journey as a corporate commercial lawyer. So if you have questions for me, I'd like to hear it. Everyone, that's it. I've done an overview of what I think they need if they want to practice as corporate commercial lawyers. Hi, Abima. I lost you for a bit.
Yes, I'm back. Speak on.
Yeah, I mean, I have just sort of recapped sort of what I think are the basic fundamentals. I ended with due diligence reviews, um, and I was wondering if anybody had any questions for me.
Oh, okay. I can see from the audience that if anybody has a question, please drop it in the chat box, drop it in the comment section so that Mrs. Mary can attend to your questions. But for now, so the bulk of our audience are there, but they would get to watch it after now because I've already sent out the link to this video to them. So, Mrs. Mary, do you have any offer for people who will be watching the replay of this video so that
Um, I would say yes. So from the 27th of this month to the 29th, which is the last sort of the last no sorry from the 29th to the 31st of this month, which is literally the last 3 days of this month, Wednesday to Friday. I will be facilitating what I think is Emmy Academies. I should also actually have said that I'm the founder and lead consultant of Emmy Academy. Um, lead facilitator, sorry. I will be facilitating the introduction to corporate commercial law practice. It is a 9 model um, um, session where we sort of go in that around the topics I have highlighted: drafting, research skills, transactional advisory, asset, what to expect, review of contracts in detail, what to expect. Where we look at how to advise on a assets acquisition or asset divestment. We understand the place of the due diligence checklist, how to prepare one, um, what the due diligence report should look like, and templates. And that course is graded depending on your, what's the word, your the fee plan depends on your year of call. So for really young lawyers, 1 to 4 years, um, they pay the sum of 60,000, but there's an early bird rate of 10% if you subscribe to the course on or before the 15th, midnight on the 15th of May. In addition, if you are a group of 5 to 10 persons, you get a 12% discount. And if you're and get it, so instead of, if you pay within the early bird, sort of between now and the 15th, instead of paying 10%, getting a 10% discount off. If you're a group of 5 to 10, you get 12% off. But this group discount applies throughout the term of the course, of the until subscriptions start on until we start the course on the 29th. If you are a group of over 11 persons, you get a 15% discount. Now, for lawyers, 5 to 10 years, you pay a fee of 100,000, but again, there's a 10% early bed discount rate, and also the group discount applies. So persons who 5 to 10 persons who,
Sorry to cut you short. I can see a question in the comment section.
no worries, I'll take it.
So I can see a question in the comment section.
Okay. Uh, what are the two or
So a
most
lawyer
the
is
thing?
asking, what are the two or three most important advice you would give to any commercial lawyer?
Um, I would say that a mastery of the areas in which you want to specialize, apart from the skill sets that I had highlighted earlier, which is knowledge of the law, sources of Nigerian law. It's good to refresh your memory on that. It's very important. Research skills, mastery of English language, ability to draft and review contracts, and how to conduct due diligence reviews. I would say a mastery of the areas in which you want to specialize. But well before mastery, I would say think, identify what are the areas you want to be an expert, you want to sort of play in, right? So that's the first one. The second thing I would say is also what so when you identify those areas, then master it, which means you have to read up everything that there is. But apart from reading up everything that there is, also identify who the experts in those fields are, and get to know them so that you can run things by them. So the reality in Nigeria is a practice in Nigeria. Sometimes there is a mixed match between what the law says and what happens in practice. And so you need to understand how the law is applied in practice. That's the second thing I would say. The third thing I would say is that you must develop commercial awareness, because you won't be able to provide the kind of support your client needs if you're not commercially savvy. So you need to learn how to become commercially savvy. So those are the three things: identify the areas, gain mastery, find the experts in that area and support and know them, and then so you can sort of understand the dynamics between practice and what the law says, the letter of the law. And then the third thing I would say is develop commercial awareness.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Thank you. I hope the property and business lawyer has been able to take note of all the list of things she has said. Thank you so much, Mrs. Mary. Thank you for your time. Thank you for communicating your offers. I'm sure that when all the digital lawyers are able to watch the replay of this video, they would reach out to you concerning your program. Please, can you give us your closing remarks?
Sure. What would I say? I would say that, I mean, there is room for you as a lawyer who either is already in the practice of as a corporate commercial lawyer, or one who's looking to play in that field. There is room to grow, because the business world is constantly evolving, particularly in the areas of technological developments. So keep abreast of what's happening and pay attention to upscaling, which is what sort of EMI Academy seeks to do, to be your upscaling partner. I would also say to you, join networks. You'll be amazed at what those networks can do for you. You cannot play solo. You need to build a community, your tribe, where you're able to find, um, to learn about developments of law. What's latest in the law? God forbid you know the law, but you must have a place to find the law, and also to find out how things are done in practice. Um, Abima, just wondering, do you think it's a good idea to, and I'm not sure what works for the group, but do you think it's a good idea to share a link to the
To do what?
to share a link to the payment plan in the chat? Because I suppose whoever is watching this replay will have access to that.
Okay. Okay. Yes, please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
1 second. I have to actually find it and then share it.
Alternatively, you can also send it to me and I'll share it with them.
Um, okay.
But if you can find it right now, you can just post it.
I think it might be easier to
Thank
send it to
you.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Precious, for taking notes. I can see some of your salient points in the comment section. You wrote scale up, join networks, learn about the latest developments in law. That's great. It's actually good to know that you are taking notes and putting it in the comment section for people who come after you and people who are going to watch the replay. Thank you so much for taking notes and watching attentively.
I have sent
Hello,
it to
ma'am.
you,
Can you find
Abby.
it now?
I think I have. I was trying to see if I can post it directly, but I have emailed it to you.
Okay, so in case you can't find it, you can just send it to me and I'll share with them. On behalf of the Digital Lawyers Network, we say a big thank you to you.
Thank you too for having me. It's a pleasure. Okay.